This next story that we're getting into is about Khanna. I'm sorry. I know you guys don't really care for his voice, but Khanna had an interview recently where he's questioned about a couple of things. One of them is immigration, and the other one is about President Biden not showing up in New Hampshire. You might actually like his response to one of these and not the other, but I'm going to point out some of the flaws in this interview that I think people need to pay attention to. So shout out to Case Study QB for this clip, and let's dive in.
Yes, and blessings to them. Okay, let's start with the border. This week marked the highest recorded number of people showing up illegally at the border. By the end of the week, it was 82,000 people recorded so far. National Review points the finger at your party, saying this: Democrats made this mess themselves. They dismantled the policies that the Trump administration had used to get a handle on the problem. At the border this week, Senator Ted Cruz said this.
I have to say I am angry, because this is deliberate. This is a decision that was made by President Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and congressional Democrats to open up the border to what is nothing less than an invasion.
So President
open up the border. Let's talk about this piece for a second. If I remember correctly, Joe Biden, the Biden administration actually were adding on to Trump's border wall. This was a question that was asked to the White House press secretary, Karine. They did ask her, how do you feel about Joe Biden adding on to Trump's border wall? And she didn't want to answer the question. So it's really interesting, like how short memories people have these days, how Ted Cruz can stand there in front of a crowd of people and tell them that they opened up the borders just to let people come through and totally omit the fact that the Biden administration has been adding on to the Trump border wall, totally omitting the fact that kids are still in cages under the Biden administration. And for all those progressive politicians who tend to cry or said, oh my God, those poor kids in the cages during the Trump administration, they have been silent about the kids in the cages under the Biden administration. And this is something you cannot overlook. So again, this goes back to the media and the politicians who go along with the State Department talking points. Notice how they omit certain facts that the American people need to be aware of.
Biden did get rid of Trump-era policies that he called inhumane. You heard what Congressman Donald said, that that's an easy way to label things that were actually working in his estimation. But nothing got done in this administration, the first couple of years of Democrats controlling the White House and both houses of Congress. So who owns this chaos now at the border?
Shannon, nothing has gotten done since President Reagan signed bipartisan immigration reform in 1986. And instead of throwing fingers at each other, why don't we come together on some common principles? We need a safe and secure border, and we need an orderly and humane process. That means Congress needs to act. We need to provide the money to have judges there and to have immigration officers so that we can actually be quickly processing the claims. The president is saying that these claims should be processed in hours. People who aren't legitimate should be sent back. We need to have more money for Border Patrol, which, by the way, the House has passed under Democratic leadership 2 years ago. The Republicans didn't vote for that. But why not come up with a bipartisan solution? That's what I want.
Well,
he didn't answer the question. The question was, who owns this mess right now? So I'll give you the answer. Currently, this is Kamala Harris's mess, because Kamala Harris is in charge of immigration and the border. That was assigned to her as vice president. We've covered this a number of times before, where when it came to the border issue and it came to immigration and she had interviews, she really didn't know how to get a handle on that question. And here's how you get a handle on that question. You have to start asking, why are people coming here in droves in the first damn place? And here's the response that she should give, but she won't. And mainstream media, if she did say it, they would not air it. The reason is because those people are fleeing countries that have been destroyed, that have been bombed, that have been pillaged, that have had resources stolen from them, that have had groups rise up in those countries with arms that they were given by the American government. So it has become unlivable for those people in those countries. That is why they are coming here. No one would risk their life to leave their home on a treacherous journey to come to the United States unless there was no hope left. That's why. That includes Mexico. That includes people coming from countries in Central America as well. That includes people coming from places like Nicaragua. You have to understand, these countries have been destroyed. And mainly because of the US government. We had a hand in it somewhere. If it wasn't us implementing sanctions on those countries, it was us bombing those countries. It was the US government giving weapons to rogue militant groups in those countries. That's why. Kamala Harris won't say that. Khanna won't say that. It doesn't fit the State Department narrative.
Is there anything that you could work with Republicans? Because a lot of those things, ramping up immigration personnel, border agents, those kinds of things are included. They say that you got to secure the border before you can do anything else. They have things included in their bill as, E-Verify as well, that all employers would have a database to make sure they're hiring people who are here legally. Are you opposed to that?
Their bill is extreme. Even the Senate won't pass their bill. I mean, their bill takes away funding from any of the NGOs in El Paso. You talk to Veronica Escobar, who represents that area. Why wouldn't we want NGOs giving water to people coming across or helping deal with the situation on the border? Their bill is for a border wall. That is not something Democrats can or will support. But we will support increased funding for Border Patrol. We will support increased funding for immigration judges to quickly process things. We will support better technology and security on the border. So why not come up with a compromise there? And the president, by the way, is doing everything he can to reverse the catch and release. You have border agents now and judges quickly calling people who are coming at the border within hours, and many of the folks who don't have legitimate claims aren't being allowed in.
So just a couple of recent Fox polls on this, on how the president's doing on the issue of immigration. 36% approval, 61% disapproval.
Yikes. These numbers look familiar. I remember seeing numbers sort of similar under Trump's administration. So when it comes to the immigration issue, how much of a difference is it between President Biden and former President Donald Trump? I just told you, kids are still in cages. You have the majority of Americans who took this poll who disapprove of the way that the Biden administration is handling the immigration issue. How is it so much different? How is it so much different? So yes, with Trump, the language, it was covert, right? Overt. With Trump, the language was overt. It was in your face. It was bold. It was out there. With the Biden administration, it's covert, but they're still doing it. We still have the same problems. You mean to tell me in 2023, they still haven't figured out a way to fix the immigration issue? They haven't figured out a way to speed up the process. I find it hard to believe. You talk to people who have lived in this country, who immigrated here. I know people, it took them 10 years. 10 years to become a U.S. citizen. Why does it take so long? It's a mess. But they're not getting to the root cause. And that's what I want to continue to point out. They're not getting to the root cause, which is why are they fleeing those countries?
And how he's treating illegal immigrants who show up. 9% say too tough. 60%, the overwhelming majority in this poll, say not tough enough. So what?
You see this? The majority of Americans are saying he's not tough enough on the immigration issue.
Whatever this administration is doing, voters out there do not think it's effective. They lay this at the president's feet.
They understand that there is the border crisis right now in terms of people not being treated in an orderly, safe, and humane process. But the problem is often with Congress. I mean, we have not provided the administration with the resources for the immigration judges or processing. We have not provided the resources for Border Patrol. We have not provided the resources for securing the border. And I don't believe this is either a Democratic or Republican issue. It's a both-party issue. I mean, President Reagan is the last president who's gotten this done. And since then, we've had no bipartisan agreement. So the question I have for Representative Donaldson or others is, do you want to just score political points, or do you want to actually work, compromise, and get something done? Well, I want to get something done.
Listen to the two of you. It sounds like there are some nuggets there that you do agree on, and so we wish you luck on doing that. In the meantime, there were a number of GOP senators who went to the border. They're back here in D.C. talking about the issue of the fentanyl crisis. Here's what they had to say.
Joe Biden doesn't give a damn about Americans. And why would I say that? 70,000 Americans died of fentanyl overdose. Why? Joe Biden doesn't care. He has a completely open border.
President Biden could use this health crisis of fentanyl poisoning to implement Title 42. He could do that today.
I believe it's GOP Senator Bill Hagerty who's got a proposal legislatively to give the power to the president to do this, to trigger Title 42 with fentanyl as the health crisis. Would you support that?
Shannon, first of all, the exact problem with politics is what Senator Scott said. I mean,
that's a yes or no question. And I want to point out something else as well, because he's about to give word salad. But you notice how certain drugs in this country, it's considered to be a crisis, depending on who it impacts the most, right? So, for example, the crack epidemic that happened in the 80s was not referred to as a crisis because that mainly targeted Black communities, low-income Black communities. But then you had the opioid crisis. You have the fentanyl crisis. These are crises because they more often impact white suburbia or white rural communities. And this is something that we really need to pay attention to. How things are worded, how they're framed. Why was it not a crisis when crack infested Black communities in the 80s? Why was that not a crisis? The response was, especially from the Reagan administration, was just say no, right? Was that Bush? Reagan or Bush? One of them. Just say no. That was Barbara Bush, I think. Just say no. Reagan's response was lock them up. Then you have Clinton, who comes in after Bush, and he co-writes the crime bill with Joe Biden. Again, lock them up. Where was the call for rehabilitation then? Where was the call for let's get them some help? This is a crisis that's affecting Black communities. Let's get them some help. There was no call for it. The call was to lock them up. So pay attention to that. Now all of a sudden it's a crisis.
Come on. President Biden doesn't give a damn about Americans. Here's someone who has dedicated his entire life to public service. I would never say that about President Trump. I would not say that he doesn't care about Americans. So why don't we actually deal with the issues instead of these ad hominem attacks on our president? Of course I would support stronger policy to get fentanyl out of America. I'm concerned about China that's been shipping it. It's wrong. I've heard the testimony in Congress of mothers who lost their children, and let's solve that. I mean, instead of launching ad hominem attacks at the president.
Okay.
Let's respond to this here. Sabby, you're absolutely incorrect. These folks are being put up in hotels on my dollar. I made one child to raise and I need my money. These folks will own a house before me and I'm an American. I don't remember saying that was not happening. I talked about why they're fleeing their country. Moving on.
Let's do a little bit of a lightning round and get to a couple of other things. The debt ceiling. There is a call by the White House for a clean debt ceiling. There are enough senators, Republicans, who say that's not going to happen. They won't vote for a clean debt ceiling. It's filibuster proof there. The Federalist, though, is summing up the idea that you can't use the debt ceiling as a negotiating tack this way. That says if the debt ceiling is mechanically lifted without any debate over spending, then it doesn't really exist. If you want to spend without any limit, just say so. What do you say?
We say that we should pay our bills, but we are open and believe there need to be cuts in the deficit. And here's how Democrats would do it.
Now, let me explain to you why Khanna is full of it here. When I interviewed Fadil Kaboub, he made it very clear to me that there were certain politicians in DC who were very much aware of modern monetary theory. And I asked him who. And one of the politicians that he named was Ro Khanna. So Ro Khanna knows about MMT. Ro Khanna knows that according to MMT, there is no debt ceiling. So Ro Khanna knows that, but he will never mention it. You never hear him even talk about it. Not once. So this back and forth theater that you see with the Republicans and with the Democrats, and they're complaining and arguing over debt ceiling. What debt ceiling? He knows this. Won't talk about it. This is why you have to call this out. Let's go on.
Would increase taxes on the wealthy. We would make sure that billionaires had to pay at least a 25% minimum tax. We would make sure that there were strategic cuts in defense spending. We would end the cap on Social Security and have taxes and have taxes over $250,000 on Social Security. We have a proposal. We just want to first pay our bills before implementing our proposal.
Okay, let me touch on this as well, because you also sit on oversight committee. The bank transactions that were outlined by Republicans this week, raising questions about Hunter Biden, what work he was doing, and why people, as you heard Congressman Donald say, like grandchildren, were getting paid. More questions and answers for a lot of folks right now. But here's something else that Congressman Donald said this week.
So they're getting into Joe Biden and Hunter Biden's financial dealings. And I want you to hear how Ro Khanna responds to this.
Whenever there was like this many companies just laying all over the place, and you see wire transfers and cashier checks over here going to random members of the family for no apparent purpose, at the size and velocity at which all of this was being conducted, the only logical conclusion of a financial professional is you are concealing money.
Do you have any curiosity, any questions about those transactions?
Well, Steve Doocy from Fox himself asked, he said, there's no evidence of anything illegal and there's no evidence of anything that ties it to President Biden. I wish the House...
Pause. Okay. Ro Khanna is saying there's no evidence that anything was done wrong. If there were no evidence, do you think they would have come forward with documentation saying, we looked at the documents, we looked at the paperwork? I played the presentation that one of the gentlemen gave about all the different fake companies that Hunter Biden and Joe Biden supposedly had set up that don't even exist. If there was no evidence, how would they know that? How would they have those names? So this is Joe Biden. See, he's trying to, Ro Khanna is trying to protect Joe Biden here, and I'm going to tell you why. Ro Khanna is gunning for the White House. Not 2024, but don't be surprised if you see him run in 2028. There's a reason why he's the one that's doing all these interviews. It's him and mainly Pramila Jayapal. Now, why do they keep bringing on the same people? Because they have political ambitions. Because they want to grow their political portfolio. That is why they continue to bring these two on as often as possible. Now, why is Ro Khanna sitting here answering questions about Joe Biden and his family's financial dealings instead of them actually talking to Joe Biden? Someone brought this question up. Stephanie, why is Ro Khanna acting as Biden's spokesperson? You want to know why? Because they don't want Joe Biden to do any interviews. Why don't they want Joe Biden to do any interviews? Because Joe Biden has been experiencing cognitive decline, and it has been getting increasingly worse over the past couple of months. And you've noticed it. You've noticed it in press conferences. So you have Ro Khanna and Pramila Jayapal to basically be the spokespeople for Joe Biden. Anything to prevent Joe Biden from making more appearances. They're trying to keep him quiet. But these people have political career ambitions. Pramila Jayapal, remember, she had wanted to be minority speaker of the House. Ro Khanna wants to run for the White House. He don't even have to tell me. I see right through this. I interviewed him and I saw right through it. He's a good bullshitter. He really is. If you don't do your research, it's easy to sit here and believe what he's saying. So he has all the making of being a U.S. president. But that's why he is here. And he's not going to speak harshly about Joe Biden until he will in a minute. But even that one isn't as harsh as it should be. But he knows how to toe the line just enough to appear to be progressive, but still maintain that DNC establishment persona.
Oversight Committee would spend more time worrying about the ordinary income of Americans going up than they are worried about the income of Hunter Biden.
No question.
You should spend more time worrying about the income of working class Americans. Just close your eyes and don't pay attention to what's happening with Hunter Biden and Joe Biden. Yes. Do I think that we need to talk about how working class Americans are struggling in this country? Absolutely. We talk about it on here weekly. We talk about it. But does that mean that you should turn a blind eye to what's happening with Hunter Biden and Joe Biden and their financial dealings? No, it does not. Khanna just doesn't want you to focus on it. He doesn't want them to find something because that's bad for the Democratic Party. And that's what this is all about. He comes to run cover for Joe Biden. When you run cover for Joe Biden, you are protecting the Democratic Party. And that's what this is.
I guess I do have, but here's my point. There is a U.S. attorney that President Trump appointed that is charged to look into all of this. And I have confidence in him. When he comes out with something, I'm not going to question it. But why are we wasting our time politicizing this in Congress? Let him do his job. He's a Trump appointee. He has full authority. He can look into all of this. I'm not going to question the facts. Let him do it, and then let's agree to his process.
Yeah,
you are wasting your time talking about Hunter Biden and Joe Biden's financial dealings. It's a waste of time, people. We shouldn't talk about the president or his son and all these other politicians being corrupt. We shouldn't talk about their corruption. That's a waste of time. Don't focus on that. That's what he's saying.
Wait on that. Before you go quickly, I want to ask you, you're in New Hampshire. There is a debate about whether President Biden's going to spend much time there because there's this fight over the primary calendar and whether it's going to count and what order. You're worried that he may overlook New Hampshire.
He should be here. He would win this state decisively in the primary. But look, people are going to be here for a year in 2023.
So Khanna goes on to say that Joe Biden should be there in New Hampshire. I agree. He should be there. You don't just ignore the state because you're just like, I got this in the bag. The DNC has my back. The Democratic Party has my back. We already changed the state so that South Carolina can go first so that I can for sure win and have a lot of momentum in this race. I don't need to go to New Hampshire and pay those people any attention. But I have a question. While they're sitting here discussing why isn't Joe Biden in New Hampshire, should he be in New Hampshire? Why isn't Joe Biden in East Palestine, Ohio? Why hasn't Joe Biden gone to East Palestine, Ohio to visit the people who've been poisoned? Why? The people who were poisoned by Norfolk Southern? The president hasn't even been there. Erin Brockovich has been there. Tulsi Gabbard's been there. She's not even a politician anymore. Everybody's been there. But the president. Why aren't they asking that question? You see how the focus is just so misguided. It's so misguided. That's what you should ask. This is Fox News. You really could have pushed him with that one. All you had to say. Why hasn't Joe Biden been to East Palestine, Ohio? Do you think that he should go there? Let's go on. Let's end here.
Trump, DeSantis, Pence, it would be a mistake for us not to make our case. We've got to be in New Hampshire talking about what this president has done in North Country, in towns like Berlin, where he's helping revitalize those small rural towns, factory towns. The president should come. He should come and give a speech about his agenda.
All right, Congressman Khanna, always great to see you. Thanks for dropping in today.
Thank you.
So here's the thing, people. He believes that I think the president can win New Hampshire. I wouldn't be too sure about that. New Hampshire is a different kind of place. Their motto is live free or die. That's my neighbor to the north. And I'm here to tell you, Joe Biden can try to sleep on New Hampshire if he wants to. Go ahead and do that. People in New Hampshire might surprise you. Some of them may be more liking towards RFK Jr. because of his takes about the pandemic and the jab. Again, the motto is live free or die. They really don't like having a lot of restrictions put upon them in New Hampshire. It's different. So keep thinking that he'll just, oh yeah, I think he can win it. That's not what I've heard from people who live in New Hampshire. Keep thinking that. Keep thinking it. I'm going to go to some of the comments here. Manu Muss, RFK will win New Hampshire hands down. See, New Hampshire, there, like I told you, the way that they handled the pandemic was different from the way that Massachusetts did. So just keep in mind. And thank you for the super chat, Roger. Joe literally said he has no sympathy for Mills. There you go. I can see that as well. I'm just here to tell you, the Biden administration should not sleep on New Hampshire and just think like, oh, yeah, we just got this in the bag. Keep thinking however you want to. Don't show up there. They'll let you know with the votes. Let you know with the votes.